Hello and welcome. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is seriously endangered by Russian action. This and more in this situation report from the war in Ukraine. Let's start off with the developments on the front line, on the northern front line north of the Seversky Donetsk. We have reports of fighting along basically the whole front line, more indications that the Russian winter offensive might have actually already kicked off, even though it's kind of petering in. The Russians have achieved successes. We have reports of them advancing towards the Serebets in the direction of Torske as well as south of Kreminna, but that's it for now. The attacks are continuing along the whole front line, and there are some rumors that west of Chervono-Popivka, they also pushed the Ukrainians back. So they are gaining ground, but they are gaining ground fairly slowly, and there are the reports of tremendous Russian losses in the process. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we have reports of advances at Krasnohora. Krasnohora seems to have fallen. There were rumors that the Russian claims that Ukrainian forces were encircled. As of now, I don't have any report of prisoners being taken, of anything that proves this claim. It might still be possible, or it might be another empty claim like we've seen it in the past. In Bakhmut itself, there are further reports of Russian advances. The Russians are slowly creeping forward, but in general, nothing has changed there. South of it, when it comes to the two lines of communication, not much change here. The Ukrainians mostly are supplying themselves over Chasiv Yar and the road going up here as of now. They are still able to supply themselves, but the overall situation is much more dire than it has been in the past weeks. Around Avdiivka, further reports about attacks, but no reports. I don't see any proof of change of situation on the ground, of ground captured by the Russians. The same in Marinka and the same in Vuhledar. The fighting there has turned to a stalemate. Russian sources claim that's because the Ukrainians rushed forward reserves to stop any Russian advances in Vuhledar. On the southern front here, basically in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, the Rogov, who is from representative of the Zaporizhzhia occupation government, he's saying that the Ukrainians are intensifying recon attacks along the Zaporizhzhia front line. So he's basically saying the Ukrainians are now mostly attacking there, and he's voicing concern for a coming Ukrainian counteroffensive in Zaporizhzhia. In Kherson, we have reports of troop reinforcements by the Russian side, Russians sending more forces, but it seems to be aimed at mostly counter-partisan activity, controlling activity, etc., but not towards offensive operations over the Dnipro River. Close to Odessa, there's the first proof of a maritime suicide drone being used actually by Russia. We see it here. It's the attack. You can see it here on the top. The attack was at the Satoka bridge close to Odessa, which has been heavily damaged and is probably taken out as of now. This is this bridge here, which had been attacked in the past with cruise missiles, but the Ukrainians were somewhat able to keep it in operation. Indications right now are that it's taken out, even though I can't fully confirm that yet. I don't have full confirmation. When it comes to the Kakhovka dam, we have very bad news there. Since the Russians withdraw from Kherson, from the right bank of the Dnipro River, and since they blew up a piece of the dam here, they are releasing water from the Kakhovka reservoir. Right now, the water level has shrunk from 16.1 to 14.1 meters, and only 90 centimeters is left in like a reserve for the Zaporizhzhia power plant, which is here. And the Zaporizhzhia power plant has this cooling basin basically for cooling water, and into that they are pumping water from the reservoir. Should the reservoir fall down below 13.2 meters, then they won't be able to pump additional water into the reservoir, into that reserve for the power plant. Unless, of course, they jerry-rig something on the fly. The general setup is not made for a water level lower than 13.2, and in that case, the Zaporizhzhia power plant would be fully reliable on this water here for its cooling without any reserves further left and without any immediate way to resupply it. Other than that, the front line, even though the Russians' attacks are massive, the front line is fairly static, not much change here. We have claims by the Ukrainians that the Russian losses have reached almost 900 men per day in the last few days. Obviously, that's the Ukrainian claim, so we can't confirm it. We have no way of seeing how close to reality it is. In my judgment, the Ukrainians vastly overstate the Russian losses, which is fairly normal in war, so not an accusation of malpractice or trying to lie to us or anything. Generally, claims by either participant of a war are to be taken with a big grain of salt, as they usually claim the enemy's losses are higher and their own are lower, which is a fairly normal way war is portrayed by a participant. So supposedly the Russian losses are tremendous. They are attacking in big parts of the front line from Zaporizhzhia up to Luhansk, basically into the border of Kharkiv here. They are advancing slowly here and there. For instance, Dvorichne is now confirmed to be in Russian hand, which is right here on the Oskil River. But the overall advances of them are somewhat limited, as the offensive has not achieved any bigger breakthrough as of now. Prigozhin, we heard something from him again. He's being called the financier of the Wagner PMC, even though it's probably paid by the Russian government. In an interview with War Gonzo, that's a pro-Russian military blogger, he confirmed again that Wagner is no longer recruiting prisoners in the penal colonies. The reason for that is that their agreement with a government entity has expired. Which one, that is obviously not clear. It's either the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Justice, or maybe the FSB, with some agreement Wagner had in this regard, and this supposedly is now expired. He also said that the Russian military will continue recruiting prisoners, though. All of this is obviously aimed at reducing Prigozhin's footprint in this war. In this regard, we have on Grey Zone, which is a pro-Wagner Telegram channel, they spread a document that is supposedly from the Ministry of Defense of Russia, aimed at mill bloggers and at media when it comes to how they are supposed to report the war and which sources they are supposed to use. I have a translation here into German, and the interesting part is that it says that Shoigu and Gerasimov, for instance, have to be portrayed positively. Surovikin, who is considered to be pro-Wagner, or he's closely aligned to Wagner and Kadyrov, only neutral reporting is allowed, so they are not allowed to praise Surovikin. And Wagner and Prigozhin are no longer to be mentioned. We've seen that in the past, that the Russian Ministry of Defense was only talking about volunteers inside of assault units when Wagnerites were doing any attacks. There is no confirmation yet that this document is actually legit, that it's authentic, but at least the overall context is fitting, so there is a high chance of it having at least some part of truth in it. The GUR, the Ukrainian military intelligence, are saying that now they believe Russia is postponing the second wave of mobilization for the reason that they are still fighting and they are still addressing the problems that were caused by the first wave of mobilization. This is a sharp change from prior claims by the GUR, which was saying that it's basically imminent. They announced several dates in January when they were expecting the second wave of mobilization, but as they say now, according to their current assessment, the mobilization will happen, but it will happen later. When it comes to international support, we have some interesting informations as well. The GUR, the Ukrainian military intelligence, has published a intercepted call from supposed Shahid pilots, you could say, like persons that control the Shahid drones, and they were talking in Farsi and Kurdish, which would indicate that Iranians are there, as a big part of Iran, the northwestern part, is Kurdish, has a Kurdish population. So Kurdish and Farsi are common languages within Iran, which would indicate that either the Iranian government is still supporting and controlling the drones when they are launched on Ukrainian territory, on and into Ukrainian territory, or that some Russian entities have hired mercenaries from that area to control the drones themselves. And finally, we have some report here on Facebook. It's from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine that the Ukrainian defense company Ukroboronprom has started production of 120mm mortar shells. You can see them here. Those mortar shells are fairly effective against infantry and against light vehicles. Mortars are generally of a short range, 7 to 8 kilometers at that caliber, but they say they massively increase production to help with the defense. Interesting here, though, again, production is, at least from what I understand, the production will be outside of Ukraine, so outside of the reach of Russian armed forces, maybe even with Ukrainian personnel and machinery that was probably moved to Poland or maybe Slovakia or even the Baltic states. But ammo production is increasing in this regard as well, and the Ukrainian defense industry still has some part in that. So this is now, what do you think? What do you think? Do you think leave a comment whether you think the power plant, the Russians are actually going to risk a meltdown in the power plant, which is turned off but still needs active cooling because of the heat of the fuel rods. This channel is only possible because of the support from viewers like you. So if you like what you see, if you like the channel, you can support the channel by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting it. Other than that, if you like this situation report, even though I'm currently fighting the flu and are probably not at my best, leave thumbs ups. Leave a comment for the algorithm, and if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos, and recommend the channel to your friends and acquaintances to help it grow. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.